I always like to refer to the definition by Japan's research pioneer, Miyako Kamiya. And she was this amazing woman. And she said you have your Ikigai sources, and that could be relationships, hobbies, your work, small joys. And then you have Ikigai Kan, where Kan is feeling, awareness, perception. So Ikigai is ultimately something you sense or feel. So it's really what makes your life feel worth living.
Welcome back to the Go Slow to Go Fast Lifestyle Podcast. I'm Kendra Chapman, your host, and this is a space for busy professionals, working parents, high achievers who want practical encouragement, simple reminders, and real life strategies for slowing down. Around here, we talk about slow living, avoiding burnout, building sustainable success, and rediscovering purpose, no matter what season of life you're in, so you can enjoy life more fully and still move forward when it matters most. Today's conversation is an extra special one because it harkens back to why I started this podcast, to explore ways to find more Ikigai, more meaning, more purpose, more of that feeling that life is truly worth living. And in this episode, I dive into a deeper conversation with someone who has been studying this and teaching it long before it became a trend. Today, I'm joined by Nicholas Kemp. Nick is a keynote speaker, coach, and the author of Ikigai Kan, Feel a Life Worth Living, Rollfulness, and his newest book, A Year of Ikigai. He's also the founder of Ikigai Tribe, which offers Ikigai coach certification and coaching programs for people who want to bring more meaning and purpose into their lives. As a diploma-qualified positive psychology coach, Nick helps other coaches guide people towards discovering meaning through the Japanese lens of Ikigai. So if you've ever wondered whether purpose is something that you find or something you cultivate slowly over time, this conversation is definitely for you. Let's dive in. All right. Well, Nick, I just want to say thank you for agreeing to sit down with me today and welcome to the Go Slow to Go Fast show.
Thank you for having me, Kendra. It's always good to chat to someone in a different part of the world. So thank you.
It's early morning for you and it's afternoon for me. I appreciate you being flexible with your schedule. So as you jump into this conversation with me, before we get into your story, do you mind just sharing with listeners and viewers a little bit about how you're going slow to go fast these days?
Sure. I think there's two things. You can affirm and appreciate what's good in your life now, which can include the small joys or relationships, and really appreciate them. And then also be intentional about your decisions, what you want to do. So you're clearly thinking about, I guess, what matters to you. So I think that's how I do it. And for me, it includes things like taking time to, you know, cuddle my cat or see off my wife when she goes to work, and just appreciating those small moments. And then if it's decision making, yeah, really taking time with it and not rushing. So things like that.
It sounds very intentional that you are trying to really soak up those small moments.
Well, that's really related to probably what we'll talk about today.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. So you have a new book about Ikigai, and I definitely want to dive into that a little bit more. But it sounds like you discovered, I was diving into your podcast episodes for a little bit just to do my research for the show today. And it sounds like that you discovered the word around 1998. And can you kind of walk us through, your experience of, you were actually living in Japan, I think at the time.
Yes. Well, thank you for listening to my podcast. So I'd returned to Japan after a year of being a trainee chef. So that was in 95, and then ended 96. And then I returned to teach English, and being young and ambitious, I remember, I think, probably trying to show off my Japanese to a coworker on a lunch break. And she sort of casually asked, "Oh, Nick-san no ikigai wa nan desu ka?" I'm like, what's ikigai? And she left me with this kind of amazing explanation. And I remember thinking, wow, you have one word to encapsulate all that. So I was quite intrigued by the word. And then I went back to the teacher's room. This was on, yeah, the first day of work. And I asked all these foreign teachers, like, oh, have you heard this word, Ikigai? And they were saying no. And then the next day, I went back in thinking I should continue this conversation with my coworker, and she'd been transferred. And I kind of remember the disappointment thinking, oh, I can't continue this conversation on this fascinating word. And then oddly, after that, I really didn't hear the word used. Can't really remember hearing the word used. So that was a bit strange. But there's another word called yarigai. Yaru is the verb to do, so something worth doing. And I'd hear that almost every week, like yari ga aru, like that's worth doing. So that was, yeah, that's how I stumbled upon the word.
And it's interesting, I think I had just been coming back from being away teaching English in another country around that time frame as well. And there's just so many words in other cultures that encapsulate so many ideas that sometimes it can get lost in translation. But, I think there's definitely been some misconceptions about Ikigai. And I myself have been, one of those who have just kind of tried to encapsulate the meaning into, the Venn diagram that many Westerners tend to use when they're trying to explain the concept. So, can you just kind of walk us through what the actual meaning is? And then we can get into the misconceptions and, kind of how that shows up in some places.
The word ikigai is a compound of the verb ikiru, which means to live, to exist. And then gai really represents value, worth, even some form of credit or result. Um, So it really means the value you draw from life. And we're talking about your life in a daily sense. We're not talking about it in some sort of grand psychological, your whole life as one idea. Yeah, so it's often better framed as the question, what makes your life worth living? Or really, what makes your life feel worth living? And I always like to refer to the definition by Japan's research pioneer, Miyako Kamiya. And she was this amazing woman. And she said you have your ikigai sources, and that could be relationships, hobbies, your work, small joys. And then you have ikigai kan, where kan is feeling, awareness, perception. So ikigai is ultimately something you sense or feel. So it's really what makes your life feel worth living.
Yeah. I mean, I think purpose is definitely a piece of it, but it's
Yes.
not the, purpose for living. It's not the essential, like what gets you up in the morning, which is the way sometimes it's been
Right. Yeah.
defined, I guess, in the past. So that's interesting that there's just so many components of it. How does it show up in Japanese culture since you've had that conversation in the late 90s? How have you seen it show up in other ways in the culture that you've observed?
So this is where it's quite interesting. But for most Japanese, ikigai is just another word in their lexicon of amazing words. So they don't really see it as a special word. And ikigai is not something they really talk about that often. So it's subjective and personal. But they might use it, or they do use it in casual conversation. On the other side, there's all this research on the concept. So there's, for example, there's a psychometric tool called the Ikigai 9 that the Japanese made as an alternative to all the well-being measurement tools that they were using, thinking, "Oh, we need to develop a tool based on Japanese well-being." And if you go to research websites, you'll find quite a lot of papers on Ikigai. So it's become a tool to measure Japan's, or the well-being of Japanese, and now it's extended beyond that to include just so many papers related to things like flow, well-being, purpose, both in Japanese and in English. One scale relates it to, for example, self-esteem. One must have self-esteem in order to kind of feel ikigai. Then that leads to not a purpose in life, but purpose in life. So
Hmm.
feeling purpose in life, which leads to this idea of personal energy. Once you have this sense of purpose in life, you're likely to do something. And so you can almost see the ikigai of other people in the way they use their energy. And then that leads them to life satisfaction. So Ikigai is more about life satisfaction rather than happiness. But actually, Sony did a large scale survey last year where they interviewed 1,400 Japanese across all age groups and had eventually a top 10 for on each decade, and then a general top 10. And things such as eating delicious food or traveling or hot spring baths came into like the top three. So very subjective and personal. And almost for every Japanese, their ikigai was, unique.
And that would make sense.
And it's never this grand thing of some business goal, or it's always something smaller.
It's not like it's a quest that you must take on as a hero's journey to find your ikigai. It's really it's
Uh,
really just, thinking about what you find it to be.
Yeah, if it is on a more intentional, purposeful side, I mean, it can be someone's. I mean, often it's your role. So it could be your role as a parent, a partner, or your professional role. So if it is your, let's say, your professional role and you're fairly ambitious, it's really like once you've found that role, life becomes worth living. So it's really the beginning of a life worth living once you think, oh, this is a source of ikigai. So this role, even this role I have now, I guess as I mean, we both have the role of, let's say, podcaster, right? And it comes with all these challenges. Got to prepare, we got to record, it's got to be edited, we got to promote it. But we probably find a lot of ikigai in the conversation, looking forward to the conversation, sharing it. And so it's a purpose driven role
Mhm,
that gives us this feeling of sense of purpose, life satisfaction, connection. And yeah, it's very subjective. It
mhm.
can be quite a significant source in your life, as well as small joys. And it could be something highly ambitious as well, depending on, the person.
So it could be as general as, because I was watching, as we do as podcasters, I was watching another podcast, and I was listening to somebody explain, I think, dharma as kind of like life purpose. And I was thinking, is there any alignment to ikigai and dharma? Because this woman was explaining to the host about, if one should be an artist in their profession, but they, because of pressures, from family or whatever, they choose to be an accountant instead,
Mm,
then they're not living their dharma, and so then they're not meeting their full potential or purpose or
potential.
whatever, what have you. And she explained about a, particular woman who did eventually, after being an accountant for 30 years almost, quit her job and became an artist and was like so happy. So it's interesting. I see alignment there, but I think, your ikigai could change too, right?
What does? And you have many. So you can have many sources of ikigai that they change. I would say that your strongest sources are role related.
Hmm.
So often profession, again, some sort of family role. And then, yeah, you change jobs, children leave home. A lot of people fall in love and then fall out of love and, they find someone else. I mean, there are the words. There's a word called kokorozashi, which might articulate finding that grand purpose or one vision that you feel compelled to pursue. And actually, Japanese use this word in business. And Japan's biggest business school has something called a kokorozashi, this life-defining goal where you want to change society and you want to have an impact. But yeah, I mean, I would say if you are the art, for whatever reason, you have this proclivity to expressing yourself through art, and it's natural to you. It's almost like a role. And if you don't pursue it and fulfill it, you're probably going to be, yeah, not the person you want to be, and life will be unfulfilling. So that can happen too. But then I would say once you become the artist, that's where your life's begun. You're finally doing it. So it doesn't end. It's sort of life begins once you embrace, oh, I am an artist, and I'll put aside what society's demanded of me and what my parents demanded of me to be an accountant or whatever, and I'll pursue what's natural to me. And then as the artist, when you're doing painting or whatever it is, and you're in flow doing that work and you're improving doing that work, that's when you feel ikigai. So you'd feel ikigai from a sense of progress, or you'd feel it more intensely in this flow state. And so then being an artist becomes this source of Ikigai, and it also gives you identity, which is also, I guess, very important.
And you've lived in different countries in your lifetime. So, have you seen major differences in Western versus Eastern cultures as far as purpose and identity? Or have you seen more patterns that are similar?
I think living in Japan quickly understood, wow, Japanese do small things or all things with a sense of purpose. And it's always a joy to go to Japan with customer service. Everything's done properly. And then when I come back to Australia, it's laid back, half-hearted, hey going. And it's almost like when I go to a supermarket, I'm the customer interrupting co-workers talking rather than them thinking, oh, my role is to serve customers. Excuse me. There is this idea of to do right and be right, and I think in Japan, they wanna do right in the moment, and I think in the West, we have this urge to be right. We want to win conversations or kind of argue our point, where Japanese will avoid that, and then when it's work, and this is just a generalization, Japanese will do right as a way of conveying, themselves. That's sort of one difference, and then Japanese do have this ability to enjoy and appreciate smaller things. I remember I'd go to a cafe and there'd be, like, almost what looked like a sliver of cheesecake, thinking, "Oh, gee, that's small." Thinking, as I'm eating it, I'd probably want a second piece, whereas Japanese would really savor and really go, "Oh, this cheesecake's so delicious," and they're really appreciating it. And then, of course, when I come home, we have these massive sizes of cheesecake that you kind of eat and then you end up feeling, almost sick. So Japanese really appreciate I guess, the sensory pleasure of something. So that they have this kind of awareness of small things, they have practices before and after eating a meal to say, you know, itadakimasu. I'm about to receive, and gochiso sama deshita, like I've eaten. And itadaku is this verb to receive. So you're acknowledging you're receiving food, but you're also acknowledging on a deeper level, something's died to sustain me, whether it's an animal or some sort of plant life. And so they say that every day. So their cultural language, these cultural set expressions, I think remind them to be in the moment.
So you would say, based on your observations of living in the Japanese culture, this is not like necessarily a spiritual or religious practice. This is something they do in their culture on a regular basis. Like everybody says those things before and after eating.
It is interesting because when you live in Japan, you get to hear it so often, you begin to think they're kind of meaningless. They just say them all the time. But then you realize, oh, no, that's not the case. It's, good parents will teach their kids to say these things. And then in the workplace, they have set greetings too. So if we were working together and then I was leaving work before you, I would say, like, osaki ni shitsureshimasu, like, I'm leaving before you. I'm acknowledging that. And then you would reply with, like, otsukare-sama, like, which really means kind of weird, but tsukareru is the verb for tired. So you're sort of saying, oh, like, you must be tired, Nick, as in, you're not really saying that, but you're acknowledging that I've worked today and I've contributed. And it kind of eliminates having to think about what do I say when I come in or leave work. And it can be like a really good reset if there's a little bit of tension with coworkers. You don't ignore each other. You just say the standard set expressions, and then that creates this harmony. So that's another idea. I think with this group mentality in Japan, they're seeking harmony. In the West, with this individual focus, we're not seeking conflict, but we're wanting to express ourselves, and that often results in some form of different opinion, different ideas, which will then could lead to conflict.
Hmm. That's interesting. Just the fact, the acknowledgement.
Yeah, but that also means Japanese do have to suppress their individuality, which can be very personally taxing for them. So it's sort of, I always think, a combination of both would be ideal.
Right. To have those routines in the work environment every day to kind of do a reset would be nice. I mean, I think, you know, there are definitely some work environments that have that built in intentionally, but not every work environment does. So that would be nice if it was part of our culture. Hmm. Interesting. I mean, I've been in 7 different school districts in my career, and I think many people listening and watching have probably had a lot of transitions. And the workplaces that are very toxic and versus the ones that are productive and have their structures that create that harmony. You can tell the difference for sure. So it's nice to hear, that countries do it differently and have more of an expectation for that. But yeah, there's give and take. If you're all doing the same thing, then yes, you do lose that individual expression.
Yeah, and to be honest, Japan does have some of their companies have a pretty bad reputation for, overworking their employees, that there's even a word for work from or death from overwork. So yeah, Japan's got its problems. It's got a lot of unique problems, but their culture as a whole, just, I tend to say like, oh, the beauty and fascination of Japan is like everything's different. And then I'll then say the trouble of sometimes the trouble of living in Japan is like everything is different, and you got to be willing to kind of be open and adapt and embrace all these differences, or yeah, you'll kind of struggle. So yeah, it's a good thing to travel and live in different cultures. It opens up a world of learning and possibility.
Yes, like
And
you said, your coworker was able to enlighten you on the concept of Ikigai just by having a conversation and asking you what yours was.
yeah, and yeah, 20 years later, I have a
Written
business
a book
from
about
it.
it.
So yeah, yeah,
That's right. Yes.
you never know.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So tell us a little bit about the book and or the podcast, whichever you'd like to start with, and kind of your process around creating the platform.
Sure. I mean, the podcast was this passion project really to share an authentic perspective of Ikigai. And as the Venn diagram and, oh, it's a word from Okinawa and it's the Japanese secret to happiness and all these romantic notions. And I remember seeing the Venn diagram thinking, I remember that word and it definitely can't be that. And then hearing, oh, all these people think it's from Okinawa and it's this key to happiness and all these romantic ideas. So that kind of inspired me to do the podcast. I thought, well, if I interview English speakers, Japanese English speakers, especially these researchers, it present present Ikigai with evidence. And then I thought, oh, once I started the podcast, I thought, oh, I should interview artists and everyday Japanese, and then even foreigners who were researching the concept. So it started as a passion project, and then that led to me really thinking about writing a book. And I self-published a book and then wrote another book. But then a publisher approached me about writing a book, and I thought, okay, that's a unique opportunity, and it's just been released. So it's interesting the role of, I guess, trying to be this bridge or some almost like unofficial ambassador of this concept for Japan's led to these goals. Like, I guess in a way, writing a book was a goal, one I'd normally never have. Didn't like writing at school. I struggled at school. So the idea of writing a book was never on my radar. But once Ikigai came into my life and once I started to take it really seriously, that was like a logical next step. So, yeah, the new book's A Year of Ikigai, and the publisher wanted one of those books where you have like a daily read, and it was very challenging to try and convey Ikigai 365 different ways. I asked 50 Japanese to contribute their Ikigai. So was that was helpful. Yeah, it's really challenging to try and take a very deep cultural complex. What's an example? So there's a word, for example. Actually, so there's other words that include the suffix "guy." So one would be manabi guy. Manabu is the verb to learn. So what's worth learning? And so I only had like 80 words to convey, and then many interesting words that we don't have in English, like kokoro tsukai, like kokoro is your heart, mind as one entity. In the West, we kind of have this idea we think with our mind and feel with our heart. Japanese would say, well, you think and feel with both at the same time. And so this word kokoro tsukai, tsukai is the verb to use. So when you're using your mind and heart intentionally, that's probably when you feel ikigai. And then, yeah, trying to convey that in 80 words was, it was really challenging. But the book is actually very, and it's really beautiful. The cover, the internal pages. So it almost kind of looks like an art book with all these different designs.
Nice. And so
And so,
you can
yeah,
use it like a daily prompt to
yes,
think about your Ikigai each day of the year.
yes, that was the intention of the book, and that was, I guess, the challenge. How do we make this short and sweet, and almost have a prompt at the end?
So do you have any kind of accompanying journal that goes along with it or any kind of companion
No, but
resource?
I do encourage the reader to journal. So that was one of the main themes, was to journal as you read this book. And then I also left with essentially 5 or 4 journaling prompts. That could be the next step. Maybe I'll ask the publisher. A good idea.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm one of those, I love thinking about ways to incorporate journaling and just kind of bring a refresh to it because, as someone who likes to meditate, I may not do it more than maybe 21 days at a time. And then I want to do something else. So it's kind of interesting to think about Ikigai for a year. I think that's going to be something I'll add to my practice I mean, it doesn't have to be next year. It can be as soon as the book is available in March in the US. So
Yes,
I'll have to give you some
please
feedback
do.
on
Yeah.
it.
I mean, I think journaling's a great, because I never liked the idea of journaling because, grammar, spelling, but I think it's like, oh, free yourself to journal. Don't worry about spelling, grammar. This is for you. It's not for anyone else. And then free yourself to write. And because Ikigai does involve what's important to you or what you care about, it's definitely worth spending time having this internal conversation with yourself on, yeah, decisions you're making or thoughts you're going through, because it gives you clarity. And then once you have clarity, it's very easy to identify what to do, what not to do. But in a world of so much distraction now, and I guess so much bad news, we don't have control of most of our thoughts, reacting. But journaling is about either having a conversation with someone, or journaling is about the only time you really have control of your thoughts to the point where you're conveying what you want to say, or what you think. Most of the time outside of that, we're just trying to process all the information and memories and future ideas and the current moment all at the same time.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Well, I love that you've written a book and that you've laid it out across a year to make it manageable for somebody who might want to explore that concept, which, and I love that you also brought in different thought leaders who have been researching or, maybe even practicing the concept in Japan, that's a lovely addition to the process. I think for anybody who's definitely in the West, just to learn more from the Eastern culture of Japan.
yes, and what's interesting, even Japanese researchers don't always agree on what ikigai is. Part of their role is they have to define it. So you'll have different scales, you'll have different definitions, and then different contexts. So a lot of ikigai research is done where people it's almost post-retirement stage. Even the Japanese government started thinking way back in the 70s and 80s, like, oh, we're going to have this aging population that's healthy, but they're all retired. What are they going to do? So they had all these initiatives, Ikigai initiatives. And more recently, they call them health and Ikigai creation advisors. And these are Japanese who themselves of retirement age, they go and get qualified to become an advisor. And then they help people transition from, I guess, retirement to a new social role that becomes the source of ikigai. So even though the word's not really commonly used that often, yeah, it is a concept that's researched, and now there are these initiatives on how can we give older Japanese ikigai. And then other researchers will do research on university students, 'cause it's a very convenient study group, a large number, but also it gives you this perspective on the ikigai of younger Japanese. And their ikigai is often tied to this idea of belonging and connection. And some young Japanese will say, oh, I feel ikigai when I'm helpful, when I contribute. when my friends need me. So it's also, yeah, so subjective. Very could be someone's hobby who likes to do their hobby in their me time and not be disturbed, or it could be this feeling that you matter through contribution.
I'm thinking about a Disney movie that I saw. It was called, I think it's Soul. Have you seen that? I don't know if it's something that if you have small children, but it's an animation movie. But it basically talks about this, and it shows a man who basically was a musician that never made it in his profession. And so he became a music teacher in a school. And then he gets his big break and he gets to go be with a band and perform and and then he dies before he gets to enjoy that experience. And then it talks about a lot of different, I mean, it's very, a lot of layers, especially for children. I'm watching it with my children, but they get it because if you're not experiencing that flow of being like an artist or musician, or whatever you're meant to do and have that joyful moment of your purpose, you just kind of, you can't explain it. But when you're in that flow, you know what
Mm.
it is. So would you say that happiness and joy that a lot of people are talking about these days and purpose would definitely all be a part of Ikigai, but then there are some other concepts, like you've said, that are also included in that. And it can change, but when you're in that flow, it's unmistakable.
Yeah, I mean that the flow state, the flow experience would be like an intense ikigai experience. And yeah, when we're in flow, life it's so good. We forget sense of time, and we kind of have this awareness of what we're doing, but it feels so good. So that's, yeah, that would be one way to experience ikigai. I'd say like intimacy. So you can have intellectual intimacy, emotional intimacy, even musicians like this creative intimacy when you're maybe playing music with other musicians. That's kind of flow, but it's felt as connection. But ikigai can also come from existential growth. So when you're, I mean, why do people do these incredible demanding challenges of, climbing mountains or exploring the ocean, or, someone might get up every morning and swim in really cold water because for them, it makes their life feel worth living, and then maybe after they get out of the cold water and they have this rush, that might be why they do it. Why do we have this desire to learn and grow and put ourselves through pressure or hardship? It's meaningful in some way. So it even can come from overcoming adversity or a challenge where you have that sense of growth or maybe a sense of, personal justice. So it's as complex as life. And when we feel that life is worth living, not only from joyful, happy moments or flow state moments, we might feel this aspect of my life is worth the struggle, even though it's challenging or painful, because there's meaning. So it's also what's meaningful to you. And it's, yeah, one of my favorite podcast guests and a friend now, Ken Moggy, who's a neuroscientist. He's written a book on Ikigai himself in English, The Little Book of Ikigai. He said Ikigai reflects life, and it's a spectrum rather than a sweet spot. And like life, it's as complex. It has the complexity of life. That's a beautiful thing, because then we can feel Ikigai from all these different areas, relationships. We can even, like, Ikigai can be this sense of nostalgia. Like, if, I don't know, 80s, you go into a restaurant and music from the 80s comes on, and you go, "Oh, I love that song." And you just feel this little moment of, "Oh, I've heard that song for so long," and you feel a little bit of connection or a little bit of a lift. And then Ikigai is also very much forward thinking. So it is what you have to look forward to. So I'm going back to Japan in May, and it's starting to feel, it's only really less than 3 months now. I'm going back with my wife. So that's something we're looking forward to. So yeah, it does include these temporal elements of memories, nostalgia, what's meaningful, what's good in your life now, but also what you have to look forward to. So I would sort of encourage your audience, always have something to look forward to, even if it's something small. I always look forward to my morning coffee, look forward to catching up with friends, look forward to these trips, looking forward to this podcast. Why would I get up at 5:30 to do this? Most people wouldn't. So it's worth it. It's worth the dialogue is worth it. Connecting with you is, worth it. So we both will end the call hopefully more fulfilled and that life is,
I think another reason why I do podcasts is because I want to be just an encouraging voice for others that are, going through something in their life that where they need connection. And it could be in a month or it could be 5 years from now or, whenever. And I love the fact that this medium, this allows us to create something that it provides hope and encouraging words and just a reminder that it is the simple things. I agree. I look forward to coffee in the morning, but I also appreciate when I don't get the coffee in the morning because of whatever reason, because then when I do get that cup of coffee, it makes it so much better. Yeah, it's like you've got to learn that ebb and flow, and the challenging moments in our life are teaching us something too. So, absolutely. And when something doesn't work right on my podcast, I can't get so frustrated to where I'm like, I'm not going to do it anymore. I just have to lean into it and learn something new because things change, right? It's always changing.
well, it's interesting you just said learn something new because that's actually one of the scale items of the Ikigai 9. So start something or learn something new. And I mean, even the title of your podcast, it could be for this episode, it could be, go slow to feel more Ikigai.
Mhm.
Because when we do slow down, and yeah, even in the case where we don't get the coffee or we're frustrated, we can pause and think, well, I'm frustrated because I care about this and it's not working. So we can reframe it like that and then slow down and calm down and then work out what the problem is. Or as you said, if you miss coffee, rather than that be an excuse to be upset or cranky, yeah, you can be grateful. Like, oh, I really am lucky. I've had coffee all this month or all this week. I'm missing it today. I look forward to it tomorrow.
Yes,
So yeah, move from being impulsive to appreciative, grateful. Then yeah, you kind of instantly feel better and you have something to look forward to. So slowing down is a great way to bring more ikigai and general well-being and life satisfaction to your life.
absolutely. Yes, and, it's in the moment, you may not always want to think about it that way, but, you can always reflect on it later, especially if you grab Nick's book, A Year of Ikigai. But Nick, if someone is not they're feeling disconnected from their purpose right now, burnout, overwhelmed, unsure, or just upset about what's going on in the world right now, what's one small reflective step that they can take this week or today to begin to uncover their ikigai?
Yeah, this is a really good question. And there could be many answers. I usually encourage people to reframe the question and think, who is your ikigai? Who is someone you love, you care about? Who is someone who's helped you and you've never really taken the time to fully thank them for all that they've done for you? I wrote a gratitude letter to someone who was like my second mother, and she's been a big part of my life. And when I started to write it, was astonishing. So she'd done so much for me. So many memories came flooding back from my childhood into my teens, into a young adult and later. And it just made me think, wow, this person has done so much for me. So there's all these people who have helped you along the way. But there are people who, if, tragedy struck and they were no longer with you, it would impact your life. So if you're feeling down or blue or frustrated, think about who's important to you and spend time with them. Do something for them, thank them, grab a coffee with them. And then if you're up for it, I would also try and challenge you to journal and think, well, get all this stuff off your chest and then start to challenge your thoughts as to, okay, what's good in my life? What can I do? Who can I help? If my life was different, what would I want to be doing? And that's probably like one of the key questions of Ikigai. Not what you want to achieve. It's like, what do you want to be doing with your life on a daily kind of context? And then, just kind of be realistic because we often get trapped in destination addiction. Like, I'll be happy once I have all these conditions met. And of course, it won't happen that way. Or even if it does and it doesn't last, we have this desire to to grow, to learn. So thinking more about, yeah, what do I want to be doing and who is my Ikigai? And I would really think about role. We have all these roles in our life. What's a role you want to give more time and care to? And in the process, you're very likely to be helping someone else.
Thank you for that.
That's all right.
So before I let you go, I think we're going to be wrapping up here in a moment. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to make sure that listeners and viewers hear about Ikigai?
I mean, I probably should say when you have the opportunity, if you ever meet a Japanese person, speak to them and let go of this notion that Ikigai has to be this grand thing. It's really found in the small. So I guess the key takeaway is Ikigai is a spectrum. And if you can appreciate all these small things in your life, your relationships, you're going to be more fulfilled. So have this Ikigai awareness. And it's really interesting. I went to like a professional speakers content day, and we stayed at this incredible house, multi-million dollar house, and we were looked after. And I saw very few people thank the staff. And I thought, wow. I mean, it just sort of was natural for me to thank them. And then on reflection, I thought, oh, was I the only one who thanked them? So we can get caught up in life where we don't even thank people who look after us. So yeah, being this Ikigai awareness, like, oh, this team did a great job, like great food, great service. Every time I needed something, they essentially gave it to me, and yeah, they felt appreciated when I thanked them. And this is kind of the way we're headed. Like the world is headed to this disconnect with QR codes in restaurants. And you go into restaurants now, you don't even have to talk to staff to order, you don't even have to thank them. So I would, yeah, say Ikigai suspect, be aware of that and express gratitude to people. They feel Ikigai, then you feel Ikigai.
Yes, I would probably be very sad if I went into a restaurant and didn't interact with anybody who prepared the food or brought the food out. I mean, that would be very odd, but I know we do have that in airports nowadays. So it is probably going to be a shift that we have to be intentional about in ways that we can be thankful.
Yeah, well, it's getting mainstream here. So every desk has like a QR code on the table, and sometimes they just so we don't even have a menu now. Like we don't have a menu, just use a QR code, and then you order, you pay with the QR code, and then not with the QR code, but you go to
Yeah,
the menu, you pay, and then they bring out the food. And then if it's busy, you end up walking out, not even thanking people. It's bizarre.
sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I've experienced that in an airport, but I couldn't imagine doing that in everyday restaurants. But I guess, if convenience and
Mm,
staffing is going to be a thing, that will definitely change. So we need to be mindful of that. And this is somebody coming from I was a waitress and being in food service, I was always very aware when I would go to restaurants. You always
yeah.
have people tip well and all the things, but I know that can also be a cultural thing. Not every country does.
That's right. You do have that service culture, and staff do are very dependent on tips. I did a few years of hospitality, and
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And, we didn't really touch on this, but I would think also another thought, you mentioned it briefly about how in Japan, the service is so, um, just intentional and
Mm,
they want to do their best to make sure that you, the customer, feel like you've been taken care of. And that's always been how I have been brought up and expected to do any role that I've had. It didn't matter what role I had, anything from when I was a child volunteering in a school situation or a church or whatever, to food service, to being a principal of a school. I was always just trying to do my best and serve. So I think that's also that ikigai. If you can do your best, I think you're going to feel like you're receiving the same, the energy back from that person too. Is kind of how I think about it.
yeah, there's a word in Japanese called chanto, like chanto suru, which means to do
Hmm.
things properly. Yeah, when my son was a toddler, wife would walk him to the door when we had guests, and she'd say like "chanto aisatsu shite," like greet our guests properly. And in Japan, you do things with chanto. You just do them properly, and it's not about trying to be perfect. There's usually just a proper way to do things. When you do things properly, yeah, it creates this harmony and connection and energy. Almost anything you half do, it has a social impact either immediately or later. If you don't clean up after yourself, someone else has to. If you're on, I mean, in Japan, get on a train, no one's on their phone. Japanese are so aware if they have a backpack on a train, they shift it to their front so it won't knock other people. And then, I mean, last time I was in Japan, there were quite a lot of tourists and they all got their backpacks and they just don't know. And so they're sort of knocking other people in Japanese, and you could sense this frustration with some Japanese, but they hold that in and you don't hear anyone screaming or yelling at each other. So there's also this awareness I should consider others
Mhm.
that is instilled in them from a very young age. I mean, it's generally a good thing. It can be a source of pressure that we just don't have in the West. Like, as soon as we get on a train, we don't care. We're on our phones, we want the seats. If we're at a cafe, you could be having this debate, this lively debate, and we're not aware, oh, hang on, we could be disturbing others and we should keep it quiet.
Right.
We're just not aware. So there is this awareness in Japan of others before me,
Mhm.
and I think in the West, I'm just being myself, It's just, and that's why it's always nice to go to Japan because there is this calm despite being surrounded by, millions of people.
It also kind of aligns with my upbringing in the Catholic Church. Anyway, it's just interesting. So, but that makes me think that it'll be a very familiar culture if I ever go to Japan and experience that. So that'll be interesting to
You
see.
should. I
Yeah.
recommend you go. Everyone should go for a trip.
Well, Nick, I mean, no, it was a fast hour. We've discussed much around Ikigai. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for inviting me as a guest, and I know how much work goes into a podcast. So I really appreciate the preparation and your thoughtful questions. I enjoyed the time we spent together.
What a thoughtful conversation. And while that's it for today's conversation, I just have to say one of the things that I loved most about this discussion with Nick is the reminder that Ikigai isn't something that we have to chase or force. It's often something that we uncover slowly through curiosity, reflection, and the small choices that we make every day. And it can change. And it really aligns with the philosophy that we talk about here on Go Slow to Go Fast, that it's really about how the most powerful way to move forward is often slowing down first. So when we take this time to pause, reflect, and reconnect, begin to make more meaning, more balance, and more purpose in our lives. And that's really what Going Slow to Go Fast is all about. If you've enjoyed this conversation, I hope that you share this podcast with everybody you know who might need a little reminder about slowing down. And check the show notes for how to get in touch with Nicholas and all of his resources and work. Until next time, remember that the light in me honors the light in you. And as you head into the rest of your week, let your light shine through. Go slow to go fast, and thanks for listening.